Let's bring the village board meeting to order, September 25th, 2023. Roll call, please.
Anastasio?
Here.
Venturini?
Here.
Doxey?
Here.
Washburn?
Here.
Bhatia?
Here.
DeGroot?
He's here. Trustee Hewitt is excused. And the next item would be Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the next item is public comment. Members of the public are welcome to provide comments on any matter. Please listen for the president to recognize you. State your name and address for the public record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. The clerk have anybody signed up? Anybody wishing to speak publicly on any matter? Going twice. Okay, we'll close public comment. We'll move on to consent agenda.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the items in the consent agenda.
Second.
So I hear a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So that motion carries. So we'll jump into some new business. We've got some community development stuff, Ordinance 19-2023. Trustee Bhatia. Oh, excuse me?
We're going to do the public hearing first.
Oh, okay. Yep. All right, so we'll call, we'll hold on to Trustee Bhachia's business here for a minute because we have to go into a public hearing for that. So the proposed amendment for the zoning code section 74-11.2 related to the specific words and phrases. So the following rules apply to this public hearing and to each of the public hearings scheduled for tonight. If you wish to speak, please fill out a public hearing form, which you can find on the table next to the entrance. Once recognized, speakers should come to the podium and identify themselves with their name and address. Please speak clearly into the microphone. Speakers must direct all discussions towards the board. I will not allow interchange between members of the audience and the speaker. Please do not interfere with nor interject comments while another person has the floor. Please keep all comments on the particular item before the board and no longer than 5 minutes. And finally, please turn off or mute all electronic devices. So here I'd like to recognize Mr. Schultz.
Mr. President, village trustees, the first Ordinance 19-2023 updates 3 sections of the zoning ordinance. The first is to clear up and clarify the revision allowances that Community Development Director has with completed applications. The former ordinance wording implied that the Development Director could deny applications or decide the jurisdiction and powers of statutorily required decision-making bodies. A request for a revision could cause a delay, but ultimately a completed application has the right to be seen before the applicable decision-making body. Second is removing reference to the village's official newspaper. We don't have one, nor does the state statute require one for villages, and amending this ordinance provides us flexibility in how we publicly notice certain types of statutorily required public notices. The third is defining the word aggrieved under the zoning ordinance, which formerly did not have a definition. We specifically used the definition that was adopted as part of Act 16 in the Wisconsin statutes to narrow the scope of appeals to reduce frivolous, NIMBY-type lawsuits. This previously appeared 13 times in relation to appeal procedures, so we thought we would just mirror the recent state law change and tighten up that definition. Then finally, Chapter 74, that's the land division ordinance. This mirrors the definition for aggrieved in the zoning ordinance. So both our land division procedures and our zoning procedures are, using the same type of definition. With that, both the staff and the Plan Commission recommended approval of this zoning text amendment.
Thank you, Sam. This is where I invite the public to speak. Any interested parties in the public wishing to speak. I have nobody signed up for this particular item. ordinance 19-2023. So not hearing from anybody in the public, we'll close public hearing on that particular item, and then I'll go to trustee Boccia for the motion.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve ordinance 19-2023, a zoning code amendment to chapter 90-510 pertaining to common practices, chapter 90-620.50 pertaining to terms beginning with A, and chapter 74-11.2 pertaining to specific words and phrases as presented.
Second.
So I hear a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board? Thoughts?
I have a little, about the definition that was added for aggrieved or person aggrieved. So if somebody is a neighbor of the person who is getting, having the zoning issue, they are not considered aggrieved if they think that, I shouldn't be able to put up a wall that high or whatever.
Not specifically, no, but they could argue that they're going to sustain actual damages as a part of that, and then they would be able to be aggrieved. However, per sub 3, person under the text may not seek review under the section unless prior to the final decision and the approval, the person provided a statement in writing on the approval to the political subdivision or agency of the political subdivision, or appeared and provided an oral statement at a public proceeding held by the political subdivision or agency of the political subdivision at which the approval was considered. So essentially, you can't sue us if you didn't participate in the process.
Okay.
But if you do, and you can show actual damages that your property might face as a part of that action, then you would qualify. So a direct neighbor might have a stronger argument. Someone 5 houses down that doesn't front this property in any way, shape, or form might have a little bit heavier lift if they would qualify.
Right. So, thank you. That
And
helps me.
what you're doing there is you're taking the Johnny-come-latelys out of the picture with that, right?
Yes, exactly.
And this is typically involving zoning board of appeals cases.
More often than not, if something is
So, right,
bad.
so at zoning board of appeals, Denise, you would have all the neighbors notified and.
Right.
And they would have an opportunity to come to that meeting and hear the case and present their concern.
This also limits the ability for people to form kind of advocacy groups after the fact. So if you're an environmental advocacy group like Root Pike Win or someone, they would qualify if, to speak on behalf of someone if they allege like environmental harm as part of a zoning change, they would qualify to sue the village. But like a Friends of specific creek or something like that that was formed after a zoning decision would not qualify. So you kind of have to be a pre-existing entity that's not specific to that individual case. It would have to be a pre-existing entity that's broad in nature.
Oh, that seems like a good idea. Thank you.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor to approve ordinance 19-2023.
Yeah. I'd like to make a comment that these amendments were discussed and presented to the Planning Commission in detail, and for the public out there, I really applaud Sam and our staff for digging into that. It's a lot of work, to go through every line and every word of the amendment, but it shows that the Mount Pleasant, our staffs are keeping us up to date. All the amendment, all the ordinances are up to date, not only to meet with any, to comply with any changes in the state law, but also as you go through the amendments and the changes happen, you find like the few things they don't work as intended, or there are some errors and everything. So I think Mount Pleasant is showing the leadership again to make sure that our ordinances are always current and updated, and I applaud Sam and Robin and all your staff, and I think our community should be pleased.
I think Attorney Smith wanted to add a word or two as well, as long as we've got this subject open.
Okay, well, as you were making that statement, I knew where you were going with it, Trustee Bhatia. I just showed the village president a picture of the award that Sam's department just won from the Wisconsin what is it, the American Planning Association Wisconsin chapter
Yes.
of, they won the state award this year for 2023 for zoning code update. And this is why, because Sam and his staff go through our zoning code. I mean, we did the huge revamp of it a couple of years back, but it takes work every year to maintain, and they're on top of it. And then from meeting to meeting, we see that. And so they just got recognized for that, which is great.
Sam, I wanted to bring that up now before you had a chance to sneak out of here when your business was done and we get into reports and stuff like that. So, yeah, again, congratulations on that. And so that was, were you invited to submit that, or how did that process go?
So we decided to submit it. Robin is the Southeast rep on the state planning board, and found that we were still eligible to submit for our zoning code update, and we included some of the changes. So Robin took that upon himself and submitted for that award. They send it to, in this case, Minnesota. So, you know, we didn't review it. No one in Wisconsin reviewed it. Planners in Minnesota reviewed the submissions to see who was eligible. And we were chosen as one of the, I believe, 3 or 4 best practice awards this year. So,
Well, congratulations. It's nice to be recognized by your peers.
it is. And
Well
a shout
deserved.
out to both Robin and Kirk at Duncan Associates, who helped us a lot go through the original procedure, as well as some of the updates since then.
So in the matter to approve ordinance 19-2023, roll call, please.
Anastasio,
Aye.
Venturini,
Aye.
Doxy,
Aye.
Washburn,
Aye.
Bhatia,
Aye.
DeGroot,
Aye, the motion carries. So let's move on to the other ordinance update that we're doing that has a public hearing attached to it. That's ordinance 18-2023, amending the Code of Ordinances, Section 90-490, flood protection, and Section 90-620, terminology. Mr. Schultz.
Mr. President, trustees, this update is in large part, or at least was spurred by some FEMA firm panels, or flood insurance rate map panels, that were updated along the eastern boundary of the village, kind of along Lake Michigan. Whenever that happens, we have a specific amount of time that the village has to update those numbers in the zoning text, to refer to the correct panel and date, to make sure that we remain part of the National Flood Insurance Program. Also with that, our friends at the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources help communities like us go through this process and provide us some updated language from FEMA that they filter through at the state level, that we then get at the local level, to make sure our floodplain ordinances are up to date. So what you have in front of you is both the updated firm panel numbers and then updated text to reflect the most recent model WDNR ordinance. In effect, this protects our residents from floodplain development. Make sure that when you are developing in the floodplain, you are doing things like flood proofing, raising things above the flood level. Protects people from amending the floodplain, so your neighbor can't do a bunch of filling and that affect you as a property owner negatively. And also contemplates that people who do develop in the floodplain may face, flood insurance premiums. But us adopting these ordinances and being fully up to date makes the possibility for lower flood insurance premiums for people who do have to buy flood insurance. So it's kind of a take your medicine, and then the people who are negatively affected do get a little bit of a benefit on the back end.
Okay, so at this point, I open up public comment regarding this matter that's in front of us. Again, I have nobody signed up for comment, pro or negative. Going once, going twice, with nobody here to speak on this item, I can now close public comment on ordinance number 18-2023. And so from here, we can go into discussion, possible action regarding ordinance 18-2023. If Mr. Boccia has a motion.
President, I make a motion to approve ordinance 18-2023, a zoning code amendment with chapter 90-490 pertaining to the flood protection and chapter 90-620 pertaining to terminology as presented.
Second?
Your motion and a second to the board. Discussion.
No, again, once again, the Plan Commission, you know,
The same.
this
comments.
particular section, we looked at very quickly because it was the entire chapter. And I can't wait for Sam to take his red lines off so he can figure out where all the periods and commas are gonna be. But it was a long chapter. It's a very important chapter. Floodplain protection, flood fringe protection, flood zone areas. It's very important that people buying properties that have those included understand what the rules are because they're very, very specific. So anyway, once again, Sam and Robin are keeping us up to date with the state and did a great job.
You know, it wasn't more than just a couple of years ago when the zoning setup that we had was all based on 1972, you know, original draft, and it had 1,000 cobbles added to it and exceptions and carve-outs, and it's crazy. And, you know, so it's...
And very hard to understand. There were lots of layers and definitions, and I think even FEMA's starting to ratchet those down and trying to limit the discussions of what you can do in a flood fringe versus a flood boundary versus Zone A versus other zones, and they're doing a good job of updating their maps as well. So.
Okay, so with no other comment, then we can call a question on ordinance 18-2023. Roll call, please.
Anastasio.
Aye.
Venturini.
Aye.
Doxy.
Aye.
Washburn.
Aye.
Bhatia.
Aye.
DeGroot.
Aye, that motion carries. Let's jump down to some finance clerk treasurer stuff. We've got discussion, possible action regarding resolution 26-2023, amending resolution 13-2022, adopting the 2023 budget for the Village of Mount Pleasant for the Parks and Recreation Funds to transfer $20,000 from Parks Fund to the Recreation Fund to cover wage expense. Trustee Anastasio.
I make a motion to approve Resolution 26-2023, amending Resolution 13-2022, adopting the 2023 budget for the Village of Mount Pleasant for the Parks and Recreation Funds to
Second.
transfer $20,000 from Parks Fund to the Recreation Fund to cover wage expenses.
There was a second in there, yes?
I'm sorry, I thought she was done.
Premature
I was
second.
reading from the screen. Second.
Thoughts from the trustees?
Well, this was explained to us in the Committee of the Whole that it's a good thing because the number of people who participated in some of the recreation functions that were held was, there was more participation than expected, required more staff to, spend hours on it. So this is a good thing. And there's money in the Parks Fund that will cover that. So this way we'll get it allocated correctly.
And we'll also look at probably again, with budget coming up, we'll probably give them a little more room next year to anticipate even more participation because part of the campus park didn't even get open till the middle of
Yeah.
summer. So just think when we have the whole summer open,
Yeah.
it's gonna be great.
Yeah, I think Trustee Anastasio hit on something. Our programs are attracting attention, and folks are wanting to use our facilities and our programs, and that's a good thing. So on the matter of Resolution 26-2023, roll call, please.
Anastasio,
Aye.
Venturini,
Aye.
Doxy,
Aye.
Washburn,
Aye.
Batya,
Aye.
DeGroot.
Aye, motion carries. So let's jump down to tourism. Discussion possible action regarding ordinance 2023 to amend section 2-321 of the Municipal Code of Ordinances pertaining to room tax.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve ordinance 2023, amending Chapter 2-321 of the Municipal Code of Ordinances pertaining to room tax as presented.
Second.
So I hear a motion and a second.
I can do it.
Do you want to just give us a quick heads up?
Yep, just briefly, this was before you at the Committee of the Whole a couple weeks ago. Minor changes to the room tax ordinance, reflecting current statutes. All of the changes are really apply to the reporting requirements from the hotels and the deadlines for which they need to submit their reports and pay the tax. The way it is currently structured, they don't have to report quarterly, and then if they're 60 days late on a tax payment, then we can take action. And it just doesn't work very well that way, because by the time that occurs, a hotel can be significantly behind. By changing it to what's proposed, we can notify them a lot quicker and start enforcing non-payment a lot faster, so then the balances don't stack up as much as they currently do in that unfortunate situation.
As I remember during that discussion as well, it was a matter of efficiencies for the clerk staff it was easier for them to keep up on a monthly basis as opposed to that 90 days. Now they've got to go back 3 months. So these were efficiencies in the timeline for them as well from a time management standpoint.
Okay. So with that, I'll call the question on ordinance 20-2023. Roll call, please.
Anastasio,
Aye.
Venturini,
Aye.
Doxy,
Aye.
Washburn,
Aye.
Batya,
Aye.
DeGroot.
Aye, that motion carries. Reports, I believe trustee Washburn had something that she wanted us to know.
Oh, I just wanted to add, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, last week Denise and I, as part of the Stormwater Drainage Utility Commission, went on a walk with Alice Thompson and her group that they are the original planters of the Pike River Pathway, running all the way from the north side of our community all the way down to Highway KR. And so we spent a couple hours out there to see Alice's enthusiasm over the plants that are coming up. She was running down into the prairie, practically into the water, pulling plants out. Look, we have, I can't remember the names. One of them even had a tiny little leafhopper on it, and she said, we have to put him back. He might be a good bug. So we're putting good bugs in there. The egrets, the sandhill cranes, the fish population that's coming back. There's an eagle that has been spotted nesting in the Pike River Pathway. Even though that part of the path is closed, there were still people walking on it, of course, and riding, and enjoying it. But it was a lot of fun and very interesting for those of us that live on the Pike River Pathway. This weekend I took my grandkids out. We were sowing seeds. It was time you can sow the seeds of the prairie grasses now. We learned a lot. Alice's enthusiasm is catching, for me anyway. And I know Denise enjoyed it too, because she's
Yes,
a great
very much.
master gardener as well.
I have a lot of pictures. I have to ask Maureen what I can do with them in terms of Facebook or whatever.
I like the happy news.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was just really a lot of fun. And it had threatened rain. It didn't rain, so we all were able to enjoy the walk. And So it's just, it was one of those things you do as a trustee, as part of your committee work, and it really is helpful to understand the enormity of that project and what that enormity allows them to do in reestablishing the areas and so on. It's much different than building a little prairie. This is acres and acres. So very interesting and a lot of fun.
One last motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Your motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. So we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.